Welcome to our training course on how to tell customer stories that will help you close dramatically more deals. Instead of spending 2 or 3 minutes on an introduction, we're going to dive right into the course. Social proof techniques, which include telling customer stories, name-dropping your customers, and other ways of talking about your customer base in an effort to build credibility, are some of the most powerful but least understood persuasive tools in your sales arsenal. Most of the time, these kinds of techniques are used incorrectly. And they're used so incorrectly that not only do they not work, but they actively damage your close rates. Okay, they damage your close rates. They actively unravel deals that should have been otherwise closed if they're used clumsily. And I have some data to prove that point. So here's where that data comes from before we get into it. We've analyzed just north of 3 million recorded sales conversations with AI. So these are sales calls typically performed over Zoom, GoToMeeting, and other web conferencing platforms. They are speaker separated and transcribed from speech to text, and then machine learning algorithms analyze the audio and video of these recordings to identify seller and buyer behaviors. So the identification of customer stories, customer mentions, and other social proof techniques, such as talking about your raving reviews and that kind of thing, those are automatically identified by the AI, and it's identified who used that technique. Was it the buyer? Or did the buyer talk about it, or did the seller talk about it? Then all of that data is correlated with performance data, which is typically pulled from the CRM, such as close rates, deal size, and then we can correlate what is correlating with success and what is correlating with lost deals. So here's what we learned from this study. Social proof techniques and telling customer stories, when used generally, decrease your close rates by up to 47%. So what we're looking at here is deals where at the intro sales meeting of the sales cycle, the rep did not use any social proof techniques, which is what we're looking at on the left, versus the rep did use social proof techniques, such as telling customer stories. And we can see that reps that use customer stories and social proof techniques have a 47% lower close rate than those that did not. That is a dramatic difference. Now, I am not saying not to use social proof techniques and not to tell customer stories, because they can be incredibly powerful. What I am saying is that these techniques are like playing with fire. If you use them wrong, you'll get burned. But if you learn to use them right, it's like bringing a flamethrower to a stick fight. It'll feel like cheating. My goal for this training course is to help you become this guy, to help you learn how to use customer stories in a way that feels like you're bringing a flamethrower to a stick fight against your competitors. So let's get into the principles. Principle number 1 is make your customer stories tribal. Make your customer stories tribal. So the opposite of tribal is generic. Generic social proof is where you are flaunting your customers and telling customer stories that have no connection to the buyer that you're currently speaking with. And this is the type of social proof that actively unravels deals. So here's how it typically plays out. You might be selling to somebody in a specific industry or somebody that has a specific pain point. But what most sales reps do is they'll rattle off the names of their biggest customers regardless of where their buyer is from. They'll say, we work with Walmart and Microsoft and Marriott and all these customers that your buyer doesn't really feel connected to. They're just big companies. And then they'll rattle off a bunch of the recent case studies and customer stories that marketing gave them without asking themselves, does this case study resonate with the customers or the buyer's situation? So the end result of using social proof in this way is it alienates your customers. They might say stuff like, that's a great story, but our situation is a little bit different than that. Or they might be a little more harsh and kick you in the teeth and say, I don't care if Google or Walmart is your customer, we're nothing like them. And that is when social proof not only does not work, but it actively pushes your buyer away. And that happens when you use social proof in a generic way. So when you are talking about your current customers, whether you're name dropping them or telling a customer story, the first thought that is going through your buyer's mind is this: are they like me? Is that customer like me? Is their situation like mine? And if the answer to that is no, you are traveling further away from getting a deal closed. But if the answer to that question is yes, now you've used social proof successfully. At least you've taken the first step in using social proof successfully. So here's how to make sure, here's the first step in making sure your social proof is quote unquote tribal. It needs, and here's what I mean by tribal before we even get into that. Does the customer you're talking about fit into the same quote unquote tribe as the buyer you're currently talking to? Are they part of the same world in some way? Do they share a common pain point? Are they in the same industry? Are they evaluating your product for the same use case? Do they have the same business problem? Do they have a similar process, or are they in the same location? Now, depending on your type of business, each one of these is going to matter more or less than the other. Now, an example of the process one, because that's the one I get asked most often about, is what do you mean by process? Is I'll just give you an example of process similarities or tribal processes here at Gong. So here at Gong, we sell to sales organizations, and sales organizations can be deconstructed into different types of sales organizations. You might have B2B sellers who are inside sellers, B2B field sales, and you might even have B2C call centers. So in our example, if I'm selling to a B2C call center, I want to talk about one of my current customers who is also a B2C call center. That means they have the same type of process. They have the same sales process. They might be in a different industry. They might even have a different problem or use case. But if they match in terms of process, now it's more likely to resonate. So your goal is to identify what tribe is your buyer in, what industry are they in, what use case are they evaluating your product for, what's their problem, do they have a common process, and where are they located? And to match them with customers in your customer base that match them in one of those worlds. In other words, talk about your customers that are in the same tribe as your buyer. Okay, principle number 2. Don't name drop customers. Stampede an entire tribe. So let's talk about what I mean by that. So your goal is not just to name drop a couple random customers. It is to rattle off an impressive list of 5 to 7 customers. And keep in mind, we want to follow principle 1. We want to keep all of those 5 to 7 customers from the same quote unquote tribe. So let me walk you through an example. Let's pretend I'm a sales rep and I'm selling to a marketing software company. So here's how a below average salesperson would name drop customers. They would say, we work with Walmart, Oracle, and Fidelity. The problem is those customers are going to alienate my buyer because none of them really resonate. And if I'm a marketing technology company and I look at this list of customers, I'm thinking to myself, these are nothing like me, and therefore this solution is probably not for me. Here's how an average seller would do it. We work with companies like Marketo, Oracle, and Instapage. Now this is likely to resonate a little bit more with me But here's the problem. Even though I've listed a list of marketing technology companies and I'm selling to a marketing technology company, it's still a very short list. Any sales rep can rattle off 2 to 3 targeted customers. It's only the most impressive sales reps, the highest performers, that can rattle off a big list of customers. And that's exactly what they do. This is how a top performing sales rep would do this. He's selling or she's selling to a marketing technology company. They pull up the marketing technology landscape, which includes a list of all the companies that are in that buyer space. And they say, these are all the companies in your space. We work with 17 of them. And that is up from 4 just 2 years ago. We've gone from working with 4 of these companies to 17 in just 2 years. Now, think about what that does. The message is not that you work with any individual customer from that list. The message is the stampede. The message is that everybody in your world is joining on our bandwagon and you'd better get on. And you can only convey that message if you have an impressive list of customers you can rattle off. Minimum 5, ideally go for more. Okay, principle number 3, invoke self-discovery. Invoke self-discovery. So here's how most customer stories start. They're not even stories, they are simply data dumps. The rep says, one of our customers, Jibatu Networks, increased conversion rates by 26%. That's not a story, and it's not going to help your buyer come to their own self-discovery about a problem they have or an opportunity that's going unexploited. It's just a data dump of results, and it sounds like every other customer story out there. So how do we invoke self-discovery? It is by focusing on point A of your customer story. If you think about any customer story, it is a journey from point A, which is typically the status quo, to point B, which is the end result. Self-discovery, helping your customer or helping your buyer discover that they have the problem that your product can solve, starts when you start your customer story by talking about point A, your customer's problem, what they were going through, the painful situation they were dealing with, and how they ended up learning about your product to begin with. So this is really the secret sauce of deal closing customer stories. When you tell the before part of a before and after story, you invoke self-discovery. And the key to getting it right is if you can tell a story to your buyer that describes their problem better than they can describe it themselves, they will automatically assume you have the best solution. I would recommend, if you're watching this, take a screenshot of this slide and put it on your desktop and look at it every week or so, because this is one of the most important principles of sales and marketing, and this goes beyond customer stories. If you can describe a buyer's problem better than they can describe it themselves, they will automatically assume you have the best solution. So let me bring you through an example. And this is a little bit of an edgy example, so I apologize for that, but it's the best example out there and I could not resist. Alcoholics Anonymous does this better than anybody out there. So if you think about Alcoholics Anonymous, quote unquote, market, they have a market of people who are in more denial than anybody out there in the world. And that is people who have a drinking problem who have not yet admitted to having a drinking problem. Well, if somebody is browsing around Alcoholics Anonymous website and they have a drinking problem, but they haven't admitted to it being a problem, then testimonials like this are not going to resonate. What you don't see AA lead with is the end result in their testimonials. They don't lead with AA changed my life, my career is back on track, and my family life is better than ever. That's not going to resonate with somebody who is not yet, quote unquote, sold on the problem. Here's what they do lead with. It started with a few drinks on the weekends. That soon became a few drinks every evening. And eventually I couldn't even relax at night without having at least 3 or 4 drinks, and my family noticed. That's when I realized something had to change. That is what I mean by invoking self-discovery. If you're somebody who has a bit of a drinking problem, but you haven't admitted to being an alcoholic yet, and you see yourself in that story, your heart is going to sink a little bit, but in a good way. You are going to see yourself and you'll come to your own self-discovery that you have a problem. That's what we mean by self-discovery here. So here's the principle. And this is another one worth screenshotting and looking and saving to your desktop and looking at every week or so. If you can get customers to see themselves in your story, they'll come to their own self-discovery and the urgency will be much greater. So here's a testimonial example that invokes self-discovery that we use here at Gong. Notice we're not immediately talking about the end result. We'll eventually talk about the end result and the outcomes that were achieved in this case study, but we don't lead with them. We lead with the problem. And the problem here is I had 70 reps handling 70 calls in 70 different ways. It was chaos, and surprises were the rule, not the exception. If a VP of sales has a similar situation to that, and they see that quote, that person is going to realize, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm dealing with. And now they are going to acknowledge that they have a problem and urgency will be set in motion. Now, once you have done that, and only once you have done that, now you can talk about the outcome that you delivered in your customer story. Here's where you talk about results, percentages, dollar amounts, that kind of thing. So the key principle, this is another key principle in telling customer stories that sell, is value from your buyer is perceived in the contrast between the before state and the after state in your customer story. So you first have to build the context of point A, the problem, and then when you talk about point B, the outcome and the results, now they land. The context from point A allows the outcome, the percentages, the dollar amounts, the results to resonate. Whereas if you just went straight to point B, they will not resonate because you have not built the context for them to resonate yet. So if you take these principles that I taught you here and you apply them carefully, you will bring a flamethrower to a stick fight. You will close dramatically more deals. It's going to take some time and some practice to get this right. But once you get it right and you apply these principles to every interaction, you're going to bring a flamethrower to a stick fight and your competitors will not stand a chance. Now, if you're a sales manager or a sales leader watching this training session, here's the bad news. Your sales reps are going to look to forget the vast majority of what they learned here after 30 days. 87% of the desired behavior, that means principle 1, principle 2, and principle 3 that we covered here, are pretty much going to be forgotten after a month. So I would urge you to look into Gong if you are aiming to make new selling behaviors stick in your sales reps' customer conversations. So here's the story behind Gong. Sales leaders are generally in the dark from customer conversations. They're blind to them. You don't know what's being said by your rep or your prospect. Are reps delivering the right message? Is your sales methodology being adopted? How are we handling competitors? Is it done crisply or are we backpedaling? And of course, are we telling customer stories and using social proof techniques in a way that's going to resonate and help us close more deals? Generally, these questions go unanswered. So Gong gives you powerful visibility into customer-facing conversations that helps you make good on 3 dimensions within your sales organization. The first is people success. When you have visibility in the conversations, you can coach your reps, you can get a greater percentage of your salespeople achieving quota, and you can onboard new hires faster. The second element is deal success. When you have visibility into the customer conversations that span a sales process, you can ensure every deal in your pipeline is on a strong path to close and make sure you get more deals across the finish line. And finally, the third pillar of getting visibility into sales conversations is strategy success, ensuring that your strategic priorities are executed against in customer-facing conversations. An example is if you just rolled out a new sales methodology, you can see how sticky it is and if reps are executing against it. Or maybe you want to make sure your reps are offering multi-year deals instead of one-year deals. Well, if you don't have visibility into customer-facing conversations, you generally don't know if those are being offered in frontline conversations. So Gong really has become the hot new kid on the block as far as sales technology goes. Some of the most successful sales organizations in the world are winning their unfair shares of their markets using it. And you can take a look at it and see it in action by going to Gong.io/demo.